Beneath Florida's glittering sun and swaying palms, a quiet but devastating crisis is taking shape. The dream of paradise, once defined by endless ocean views, booming suburbs, and a life of warmth and leisure, is now colliding with a harsh economic reality. As 2025 moves forward, the cracks are widening. Across the Sunshine State, thousands of brand new homes, once proudly advertised as symbols of prosperity, now sit eerily vacant. Streets lined with fresh developments echo with silence rather than the laughter of new families. The warning signs are everywhere. Home values are plunging by tens of thousands of dollars, with some cities suffering declines of more than 15%. Families who thought they had secured a piece of Florida's eternal promise now face crushing financial burdens. The brutal combination of relentlessly rising mortgage rates and skyrocketing insurance costs is hammering affordability in ways the state has never seen before. For many, monthly payments that once seemed manageable have spiraled out of reach, with typical mortgages soaring to over $3,200 and insurance premiums climbing to $6,000 or more. Developers who only a short time ago thrived in a feverish building boom are now openly panicking. Incentives that were once unthinkable, slashing $25,000 from a sale price or offering costly perks just to move inventory, have become common. Yet, despite their desperation, buyers remain scarce. Household incomes simply cannot keep pace with the crushing financial weight, and the Florida dream is fracturing before everyone's eyes. This is not just a slowdown, it is a reckoning that threatens the very foundation of Florida's housing market. Welcome to the Sunshine State's darkest secret, the 10 fastest collapsing housing markets, where paradise is slipping further out of reach. And at number 10 on our countdown is Fort Lauderdale, a city once celebrated as the Venice of America. Known for its dazzling beaches, intricate canal systems, and world-class yachting industry, Fort Lauderdale grew at a remarkable pace. It epitomized the coastal luxury boom that fueled Florida's broader housing bubble. This rapid surge, however, was never sustainable. Fort Lauderdale's price explosion was fueled almost entirely by wealthy out-of-state buyers, foreign investors, and remote workers seeking exclusivity and lifestyle. By 2022, the city's median home price had skyrocketed to $680,000, detaching entirely from local incomes and fundamental economic value. Developers seized the opportunity, flooding the market with luxury condos and beachfront towers. For a while it worked, until demand suddenly cooled. Now, inventory has surged, particularly in the luxury condo and waterfront segments. Prices are sliding sharply, with the median dropping back to an estimated $555,000, a decline of $125,000 or nearly 18.4% from its peak. The financial foundation of this paradise is cracking. Skyrocketing insurance costs, often ranging from $10,000 to $15,000 per year due to rising hurricane risks, are compounding the problem, turning ownership from a dream into a nightmare. Fort Lauderdale's speculation-driven growth marked the beginning of the bubble, and today it is enduring one of the hardest resets, especially in the high-end sector. For anyone watching Florida's unraveling housing story, this city is now a critical warning sign. At number 9, we move to Cape Coral, a city once considered one of Florida's crown jewels for both retirees and remote workers. Nestled along the Gulf Coast and famous for its astonishing 400 miles of man-made canals, Cape Coral seemed to embody the very essence of affordable paradise. For years, its combination of enticingly low taxes, abundant waterfront property, and a relaxed pace of life created a powerful magnet for buyers. Just a few short years ago, this city was celebrated as one of the fastest-growing housing destinations in the nation. During the pandemic-era boom, demand for Cape Coral homes skyrocketed. Buyers from across the country rushed in, many eager to escape crowded northern cities or embrace remote work in a sun-drenched setting. Builders could hardly keep up. Homes were often sold before the last nail was hammered, and prices climbed with dizzying speed. By early 2022, the city's median home price peaked at around $430,000, a dramatic rise from the pre-pandemic norm when prices sat comfortably under $280,000. But in 2025, the story has shifted violently. Cape Coral is now experiencing one of the sharpest and most painful housing corrections in the state. median home values have tumbled to approximately $372,000, a staggering $58,000 drop, representing a 13.5% decline in just over 2 years. What was once a feeding frenzy has turned into a market in retreat, with sellers anxiously waiting for offers that never seem to come. Builders, who once reveled in selling properties before they were even completed, now find themselves slashing prices in desperation. Discounts of $40,000 to $70,000 are not uncommon, just to spark a single bid. Some builders have been forced to throw in expensive incentives, from upgraded appliances to rate buydowns, hoping to lure cautious buyers back to the table. Yet even with these aggressive tactics, demand remains weak. The financial pain does not end with falling values. Insurance costs have skyrocketed, driven by heightened hurricane risks and the catastrophic collapse of multiple regional insurers. Homeowners who paid roughly $2,400 annually in 2020 now face policies costing as much as $5,800 per year. Property taxes have climbed as well, with the average bill reaching close to $4,000. The crushing math of homeownership no longer works for many. Adding to the turmoil, mortgage rates hovering around 7% have made affordability a nightmare. A $370,000 home, once within reach of many first-time buyers, now requires over $2,600 per month in principal and interest payments alone. Just a few years ago, that same loan commanded less than $800 per month. This dramatic increase has priced out a whole generation of potential buyers. As a direct result, first-time homebuyers are fleeing the market, investors have pulled back entirely, and out-of-state migration, the lifeblood of Cape Coral's growth, has slowed dramatically. Without new demand, the once buoyant market is sinking fast. Empty homes line neighborhoods that just 2 years ago were buzzing with activity. Cape Coral, once hailed as a pandemic success story, has become a cautionary tale. It reveals how quickly fortunes can reverse when unsustainable growth collides with financial realities. And the chilling truth is this: Cape Coral's correction may just be the beginning, not the end. At number 8, we turn our focus to Ocala, a city that just a few years ago was considered one of the brightest rising stars of Florida's housing boom. Nestled in central Florida and known as the horse capital of the world, Ocala attracted waves of new residents during the pandemic era. Retirees, remote workers, and families alike were drawn to its combination of natural beauty, affordable land, and a quieter lifestyle compared to Florida's bustling coastal metros. By 2022, the demand for homes here surged with such intensity that prices climbed to an astonishing median of $379,254, making Ocala one of the fastest-growing markets in the state. But in 2025, the narrative has taken a dramatic turn. Home prices in Ocala have fallen sharply to about $321,224. That represents a painful $58,000 loss, or roughly 15.3% below the peak. For many homeowners, this has meant watching their hard-earned equity vanish almost overnight. And for recent buyers who purchased at the top, the sting is even worse. They now face mortgages far higher than the homes are worth, a situation that leaves them trapped and vulnerable. One of the most glaring problems plaguing Ocala is overbuilding. During the frenzy of the pandemic boom, builders scrambled to meet surging demand. Entire subdivisions seemed to appear overnight, row after row of identical homes constructed with the assumption that buyers would keep coming. But demand has evaporated. Now, many of those brand new homes sit empty. They're for sale, signs gathering dust. Instead of vibrant neighborhoods filled with new families, Ocala is left with ghost-like stretches of unsold inventory. The ripple effects are severe. Pending sales have collapsed at an alarming rate, with more than 30% of deals falling apart in the last quarter alone. Buyers are struggling to secure financing as lenders raise down payment requirements and tighten credit standards. Even those who qualify often get cold feet, unwilling to gamble on a market that is visibly in decline. The result is a surge of canceled contracts and more properties stuck in limbo. Meanwhile, foreclosure rates are rising at a pace that alarms both local officials and financial analysts. Homeowners who stretched themselves thin to buy at the peak now face overwhelming monthly costs, exacerbated by escalating insurance premiums and unexpected HOA fees. Year-over-year, foreclosure filings in Ocala have jumped by more than 60%, a staggering figure that underscores just how fragile this market has become. For those still holding on, the challenges are relentless. Insurance premiums that once seemed manageable have doubled or even tripled, often eating up thousands more per year. HOA boards, strapped with higher maintenance and storm-related costs, have raised fees sharply, putting yet another strain on household budgets. Many families who dreamed of stability in Ocala now find themselves on the edge of financial ruin. Ocala's story is not just about falling prices. It is about the broader collapse of confidence. Buyers no longer trust the market here. Sellers are desperate but unable to lower prices enough to attract bids without destroying their own financial standing. The city that once epitomized the pandemic-era migration boom is now one of the clearest examples of how quickly a housing dream can unravel. At number 7, we arrive in Tampa, a city that just a few years ago was widely celebrated as one of Florida's fastest-growing urban centers. Known for its booming job market, lively cultural scene, and prime Gulf Coast location, Tampa was a magnet for both families and investors. Between 2021 and 2022, this city became a symbol of Florida's meteoric housing rise, drawing in retirees, remote workers, and, perhaps most significantly, Wall Street-backed institutional investors eager to profit from short-term rentals and long-term appreciation. The frenzy was unmistakable. Bidding wars erupted across the metro area, with homes selling in days, sometimes hours, and often for tens of thousands above asking price. This demand, fueled as much by speculative money as by genuine growth, propelled Tampa's median home price to $383,110 in 2022. For many locals, the pace of appreciation felt surreal, with home values increasing faster than wages could ever keep up. It was the textbook definition of a bubble in the making. But that glowing reputation has now dimmed. By mid-2025, Tampa's median price has retreated to $360,130, and the numbers tell only part of the story. Housing inventory has exploded, rising by more than 55% in a single year. Homes that once vanished in less than 2 weeks now languish on the market for 75 to 90 days. Sellers who used to entertain multiple offers are now grateful for just one, even if it comes with demands for price cuts or costly concessions. The once booming short-term rental market, a key pillar of Tampa's appeal to investors, has collapsed under the weight of oversupply. Thousands of Airbnb and VRBO landlords, once confident they could rent their properties year-round, are now flooding the resale market, adding to the glut of inventory. This influx has put further downward pressure on home prices and made it clear that the speculative segment of Tampa's housing boom is unraveling. Financing has become another critical choke point. With mortgage rates hovering at 7.5%, affordability has eroded dramatically. Buyers who could once secure a reasonable monthly payment are now priced out, leaving homes sitting empty. For Tampa's working-class residents, where median wages remain far below the threshold needed to comfortably afford these inflated prices, the dream of ownership is slipping away. The warning signs couldn't be clearer: overvaluation, oversupply, and diminishing demand. These are the classic hallmarks of a bubble deflating. Unless there is a dramatic shift, either through falling interest rates or a sudden surge of buyer confidence, Tampa risks becoming one of the most significant housing correction stories in Florida. Once the pride of the Gulf Coast, Tampa now stands as a sobering reminder that no city, no matter how dynamic or desirable, is immune to the forces of an overheated market. Its fall from the spotlight is as swift as its rise, and the path ahead looks increasingly uncertain. At number 6, we focus on Jacksonville, Florida's largest city by land area, and once one of the strongest beneficiaries of the pandemic-era housing surge. Between 2020 and 2022, Jacksonville experienced a remarkable boom. Families from across the country, drawn by its relative affordability, expanding job market, and suburban sprawl, poured in. For a while, the story was one of unstoppable growth. But in 2025, that storyline has changed dramatically. Jacksonville's housing market has shifted from an exuberant boom to an undeniable slowdown that borders on collapse. The numbers are stark. The median home price has fallen from its mid-2022 high of $410,000 to roughly $357,000. That $53,000 decline represents nearly a 13% drop in value, a significant reversal for a market that seemed bulletproof only a few years ago. The reasons for this sharp downturn are rooted in a combination of affordability pressures, overbuilding, and swelling inventory. In 2021, Jacksonville had fewer than 4,500 active listings at any given time, a figure that underscored the intense demand of that era. Today, that number has surged to nearly 9,000, an increase of more than 100%. Homes that once sold in less than 10 days are now taking 40, 50, sometimes 60 days to find a buyer. For a city that once thrived on fast turnover, the slowdown is jarring. Sellers, desperate to attract attention, are slashing prices and offering thousands in cash toward closing costs. Incentives that were once unheard of, such as covering buyers' insurance premiums or offering free upgrades, are becoming more common. Yet, even these gestures cannot disguise the fact that demand has thinned to a trickle. The overbuilding in suburban communities like Middleburg and Oakleaf has made matters worse. Developers, confident that demand would never falter, constructed vast numbers of new homes. Now, these very neighborhoods are weighed down by surplus inventory. Buyers, who once lined up for the chance to purchase, are instead walking away, leaving developers and homeowners alike struggling to cope with downward price pressure. Then there is the relentless rise in costs beyond the purchase price. Insurance premiums in Jacksonville have nearly doubled, climbing from an average of $2,100 in 2021 to over $4,200 today. Homeowners in flood-prone areas near the St. Johns River feel the pain most acutely, with annual bills that strain household budgets to the breaking point. Property taxes have also surged, with average tax bills reaching nearly $3,800 as assessments catch up with the inflated values of the boom years. Mortgage rates at 7% are the final blow. A $357,000 home now demands a monthly principal and interest payment of over $2,500. For a city where the median household income hovers around $63,000, this is a financial burden many families cannot shoulder. The once affordable promise of Jacksonville has eroded, replaced by a harsh reality. A market where prices are too high for locals, yet still falling under the weight of oversupply. What was once a pandemic-era housing winner has become a cautionary tale. Jacksonville's downturn highlights how fragile rapid growth can be when it collides with rising costs, surging inventory, and eroding affordability. The optimism of just a few years ago has given way to deep uncertainty, and the road ahead looks increasingly steep. At number 5, we turn to Sarasota, a city long admired for its pristine white sand beaches, thriving art scene, and reputation as a haven for retirees seeking a blend of culture and coastal charm. Sarasota's allure during the boom years of the early 2020s was undeniable. Wealthy out-of-state buyers and second home seekers from across the nation, and even from abroad, poured into the city, driving its market into an overheated frenzy. The numbers illustrate just how extreme the surge was. By 2022, Sarasota was labeled one of the most overvalued housing markets in all of Florida, with prices soaring as much as 38% over fair market value. Luxury homes, particularly those near the waterfront, fetched staggering sums. Properties that once sold for under $1 million were suddenly commanding well above $1.2 million, as affluent buyers scrambled to secure their slice of paradise. The market was moving so quickly that homes often received multiple offers within days, creating an aura of invincibility. But in 2025, that aura has shattered. Sarasota is now undergoing a painful correction that reveals just how inflated the market had become. Inventory has surged to levels not seen since 2015, with more than 3,700 homes listed for sale. This glut of properties has fundamentally shifted the balance of power from sellers to buyers. Homes that once sold within weeks are now sitting unsold for months, and price cuts have become routine rather than rare. For luxury homeowners, the sting is particularly sharp. Properties that commanded $1.2 million at the peak are now struggling to move even at $975,000. The loss of hundreds of thousands of dollars in equity in such a short time has rattled confidence among both investors and longtime residents. And the pain doesn't stop with falling prices. Mortgage rates hovering near 6. 75% have thinned the pool of qualified buyers, while rising insurance costs have turned ownership into an increasingly heavy financial burden. Waterfront homes, once Sarasota's crown jewel, now face crippling premiums that range from $8,000 to over $10,000 annually. Add to this the relentless rise in property taxes, and the true cost of ownership has become unsustainable for many. For retirees living on fixed incomes, the financial squeeze is particularly harsh. Even affluent buyers who might have absorbed higher costs in the past are now rethinking their investments in a market that appears unstable and overextended. Sarasota's current struggles serve as a clear reminder of how fragile speculative growth can be when it detaches from local economic fundamentals. The same features that made it a magnet for wealthy buyers, luxury, exclusivity, and a sense of timeless paradise, also made it vulnerable to the sharpest correction once demand cooled. For anyone looking at Florida's housing market, Sarasota is more than just another city on the list. It is the place where the bubble in the luxury segment inflated fastest, and now it is one of the clearest examples of just how painful the correction can be when speculative energy drains away. At number 4, we arrive at Port St. Lucie, a city that has long been celebrated as one of Florida's most family-friendly and desirable communities. Known for its safe neighborhoods, clean streets, and steady population growth, Port St. Lucie became a magnet for both retirees and young families alike during the pandemic-era surge. The demand here was so intense that by 2022, home prices had soared to an average of $405,010, a reflection of the city's rapid ascent as one of the Sunshine State's hottest markets. But just a few years later, the story has changed. By 2025, home values have slipped to about $375,513, a drop of $29,497, or just over 7%. On paper, that decline might not appear as catastrophic as the losses seen in other Florida cities. But beneath the surface, the warning signs are multiplying quickly, pointing toward a much deeper correction that could unfold in the years ahead. One of the clearest cracks lies in buyer demand. The lifeblood of Port St. Lucie's growth came from out-of-state buyers who flocked here during the pandemic. Many were drawn by the promise of larger homes, lower costs, and an easy Florida lifestyle. But that pipeline of demand has nearly dried up. With mortgage rates hovering near 7% and with fewer people relocating to Florida than during the frenzy of 2020-2022, the bidding wars that once defined this market have disappeared. Sellers now find themselves offering concessions, mortgage rate buydowns, and even aggressive price cuts just to bring buyers through the door. Pending sales tell an even darker story. In the past year, nearly 1 out of every 3 contracts in Port St. Lucie has collapsed before closing. Financing hurdles, low appraisals, and simple buyer hesitation are all contributing factors. Each canceled contract adds to the uncertainty, leaving both sellers and buyers wary of the city's trajectory. On top of that, homeowners are facing a surge in HOA fees that has rattled confidence across many newer communities. Costs that once averaged around $80 per month have climbed to $150 or even $200, as associations scramble to cover rising insurance premiums, increased maintenance expenses, and storm-related upgrades. For families already strained by higher mortgages and rising property taxes, these additional fees are pushing budgets to the breaking point. The data on time to sell is equally alarming. In 2022, homes in Port St. Lucie typically sold in just 24 days. Fast forward to 2025, and that average has stretched to more than 65 days, a flashing red warning light in a market that depends heavily on momentum. Each additional week on the market erodes seller confidence, leading to more price reductions and creating a feedback loop of falling values. While Port St. Lucie has not yet experienced the free fall of markets like North Port or Fort Myers, the foundations of its once robust growth are undeniably weakening. Without a reversal in mortgage rates or a sudden surge in local job growth, the city risks sliding deeper into a prolonged correction. For now, the market may still appear stable on the surface, but underneath, the forces that once fueled its growth are stalling, and the consequences could be severe in the years ahead. At number 3, we turn to Fort Myers, a city that became the very epicenter of Florida's pandemic-era housing boom. Few places embodied the gold rush mentality of the early 2020s more vividly than Fort Myers, where buyers lined up for properties and sellers could barely keep up with the surging demand. Between 2019 and 2021, the market here saw one of the most breathtaking price accelerations in the state, with the median home value soaring from $270,000 to a staggering $425,000 in just 2 years. That represented an eye-watering 57% increase, transforming Fort Myers into one of the hottest housing stories in the nation. But what rises too quickly often falls just as fast. By 2025, Fort Myers has experienced one of the sharpest corrections in Florida. Median prices have slipped back to roughly $367,000, a decline of $58,000 or about 13.6%. While that drop alone is painful, it is the broader picture that reveals just how vulnerable Fort Myers has become. Housing inventory has exploded. In early 2022, the number of active listings was fewer than 1,500. Today, that figure has more than doubled, surpassing 3,800. This surge is the direct result of builders who grossly miscalculated post-pandemic demand, flooding the market with new construction projects. Homes that once sold before completion now linger unsold for months. The average days on market has tripled, from just 20 days in 2021 to nearly 65 days by mid-2025. The desperation among sellers is palpable. Price reductions of $20,000 to $50,000 are now routine, and many are offering creative incentives like free appliances, rate buydowns, or covering closing costs in a bid to capture dwindling buyer interest. These concessions, once rare, highlight how dramatically the balance of power has shifted. Insurance costs have compounded the crisis. The devastating legacy of Hurricane Ian continues to haunt the region as insurers raise premiums to levels many families can no longer bear. The average homeowner in Fort Myers now pays over $6,200 annually for coverage, more than double the $2,800 average of just 5 years ago. For households already stretched thin by rising mortgage costs, these premiums are pushing many to the brink. Property taxes are another relentless burden, with the average annual bill climbing to around $4,000. Combine this with mortgage rates hovering near 7%, and affordability has been all but obliterated. A buyer who could once purchase a $350,000 home with a monthly payment of $1,800 now faces a crushing $2,600 bill for the same property. That 44% increase is unsustainable in a city where the median household income still sits just below $60,000. The result is a market in distress. Local buyers are priced out, while out-of-state investors who once fueled the frenzy have vanished. Fort Myers, which built its boom on seasonal demand and speculative energy, is now left exposed to the hard realities of oversupply and financial fragility. Sunny skies still define the city's postcard image, but beneath the surface, the real estate outlook is stormy. Fort Myers is no longer the story of meteoric growth. It is the story of a market correction so sharp that it may take years to recover. At number 2, we come to Miami, Florida's glittering global icon. Known worldwide for its luxury lifestyle, vibrant culture, and thriving tourism industry, Miami's housing market once seemed untouchable. During the boom of the early 2020s, it felt as though the city had discovered immunity from the economic forces that plagued other metros. High-rise condos dotted the skyline, luxury waterfront homes drew international buyers, and the city's radiant sunshine gave an illusion of endless prosperity. By 2022, the frenzy had reached unprecedented levels. Across the Tri-County region, Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach, the median home price climbed close to $540,000, while condos averaged $420,000. Fueled by international capital seeking safe havens, Wall Street investors, and waves of high-income buyers, Miami's market appeared unstoppable. It was not just a housing boom, it was a global spectacle of wealth and speculation converging on the Sunshine State's crown jewel. But 2025 has rewritten that narrative. Miami is now facing one of its steepest housing collapses in decades. Median property values across the region have fallen to roughly $450,000, representing a 16.7% decline. The condo market, long the beating heart of Miami's real estate economy, has been hit even harder. Condo prices have dropped to just $320,000, a devastating 23.8% fall from their peak. For investors who bet heavily on Miami's eternal demand, the losses are staggering. The roots of this decline run deep. Miami's dependence on luxury buyers and foreign capital left it exposed to global shifts. As interest rates rose and economic uncertainty spread, the pool of wealthy buyers dried up. The sheer volume of luxury condos built during the boom now sits as a looming liability. Listings have surged from about 9,000 in 2022 to nearly 17,000 by mid-2025, creating a historic oversupply. Meanwhile, the financial burdens of ownership in Miami have become unbearable. Florida's escalating insurance crisis has been especially brutal here. Homeowners in coastal zones now routinely face premiums in the tens of thousands, with average annual costs adding several $1,000s to an already high price of living. Property taxes and maintenance fees compound the strain, leaving many owners underwater financially. For condo dwellers, association fees have also climbed sharply, as buildings grapple with stricter safety codes in the aftermath of the Surfside tragedy. The rental market, once a steady fallback for investors, is also softening. With an oversupply of condos hitting the market simultaneously, rents have leveled off or even declined in some neighborhoods, cutting into returns. Mortgage rates hovering at 7% further erode the feasibility of purchasing, leaving luxury towers dotted with vacant units. The irony is striking. Miami remains as dynamic, diverse, and visually dazzling as ever, but the math no longer works. The city's skyline, glittering with glass towers, conceals a housing sector weighed down by oversupply, crushing costs, and waning demand. Miami's boom, built on speculative foundations, has turned into a cautionary tale of what happens when growth detaches from sustainability. For anyone considering Miami in 2025, the warning is clear. Beneath the sunshine and glamour lies a housing market already cracking under its own weight. Finally, at number 1, we arrive in North Port, a city in Sarasota County that has tragically claimed the title of Florida's fastest collapsing housing market in 2025. Just a short time ago, North Port was considered one of the state's most promising growth stories. Families flocked here for affordable homes, new communities sprouted up seemingly overnight, and developers poured resources into building thousands of single-family houses to meet surging demand. During the pandemic era, the market here became almost feverish. In 2020, the median home price stood at just $260,000. By mid-2022, it had skyrocketed to an astonishing $450,000, a 73% increase in barely 2 years. For many residents and investors, North Port seemed like the ultimate Florida success story. A once modest city transformed into a booming hub of suburban growth. But that meteoric rise has now reversed into an undeniable bust. In 2025, the median home price has plummeted to $377,000. That $73,000 decline represents a 16.2% year-over-year drop, the largest in the state. For families who bought at the peak, the equity they believed would secure their future has vanished almost overnight. The causes are both clear and painful. Overbuilding is perhaps the most critical factor. From 2021 to 2023, developers aggressively flooded the market with new homes, assuming the wave of buyers would never slow. Instead, the city now faces a glut of supply that dwarfs demand. Active listings have surged from fewer than 900 in early 2022 to over 2,300 in mid-2025, a staggering 150% increase. Homes that once sold within a week now linger unsold for 70 days or more, eroding confidence with every passing month. Builders are slashing prices by $40,000 to $60,000 and covering closing costs just to move inventory. But even these dramatic incentives are failing to fully offset the brutal economics of home ownership. With interest rates around 7%, a $377,000 mortgage now requires nearly $2,650 a month, up from just $1,500 at pandemic-era rates. For households earning average local wages, this burden is crushing. Insurance premiums have soared as well. leaping from about $2,200 in 2020 to more than $5,800 in 2025. Flood zone remapping and heightened hurricane risks have compounded the pain, pushing many owners to the brink. Add in average property taxes of $4,200 a year, and what was once marketed as an affordable suburban dream has turned into a financial nightmare. Even the rental market has failed to provide relief. Rents that peaked at $2,350 in 2023 have tumbled to just $2,050 by mid-2025, further undercutting investor confidence. The very engines that once fueled growth, affordability, migration, and investor interest have sputtered out, leaving North Port exposed as the sharpest casualty of Florida's housing downturn. The story of North Port encapsulates the broader lesson of Florida's housing collapse. Across the state, from Fort Lauderdale's luxury condos to Cape Coral's canals, from Ocala's overbuilt subdivisions to Miami's glittering skyline, the dream has been distorted. Rising interest rates, skyrocketing insurance costs, relentless property taxes, and speculative overbuilding have converged into a perfect storm. Florida's beaches are still beautiful, its skies are still blue. But beneath the sunshine, the cracks are widening. What once looked like paradise is revealing its fragility, reminding us that housing markets are never immune to economic reality. For prospective buyers, the message could not be clearer. Caution, research, and patience are now essential, because in 2025, knowing where not to buy in Florida may prove to be the smartest investment decision of all.